Hello, my name is Emily Bacon, and welcome to the Olive Press. I am with my sister, Eliana Cahill, who is studying to be a mortician. She's not a mom, but she has a really cool story, and you can still hear Gianna in the background. It's on theme. So,
Can't get
Eliana,
rid of her.
I know. That shouldn't have sounded sad. I'm just sick. Got a stupid cold right now, so yeah. So, how long do you have left of school?
A year from June, so June 2024,
Okay.
and then I have to take the national board exam, and the laws exam, and then I will be fully licensed in whatever state that I decide to go to.
So, can you do embalming after that? Or is it only for funeral directing?
So the program that I'm in is a mortuary science program, which means that it's dual license, so I'll be both. So when you take the national board exam, it's split into two tests. So there's the arts part, that's the funeral directing part, and then there's the science part, which is the embalming part. So I'm taking both of them, hopefully at different times so that I don't
Okay.
fail one. But technically you could just be a funeral director or just be an embalmer. That's just not the route that I'm going.
Okay. So, just to preface for everybody that's listening, there will be some graphic descriptions. So, if you are squeamish or you just don't really want to hear about this industry, the death industry, maybe don't listen to this episode. It is very fascinating though. So you might learn something new, but I totally get it if you don't watch it because death is icky. So,
I'll try to keep it kind of vague. I won't make it super graphic, but death is not always the prettiest thing in the entire world, so it's a little bit difficult to talk about without a little bit of nauseating topics, but
yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you have been warned. So let's get into why did you choose this?
So it's kind of a stupid story compared to everyone else's. I read a book in eighth grade, like straight up just a book I found at the library that was about morticians. And that day I went to my mom and I said, I'm going to be a mortician. So I was 14 years old. And I think at the time she probably thought it was just this weird phase that I was going through, but it just didn't go away. I think part of it had to do with the fact that we lost a lot of family members when I was a child.
Yeah.
And I was at all of those funerals and I was always kind of fascinated by it. I remember going to Papa's funeral and I didn't fully grasp what embalming was or why he looked like that, but it was kind of fascinating to me that he kind of looked like he was sleeping and that we were allowed to see him. I thought that was kind of cool. And then I read that book and it described how funeral directors and embalmers do that. And it kind of clicked in my brain. I was like, oh, you can do that. Like, this is something that I can get paid for. So after that, I was sold. I read the book in literally a day.
What was the book called?
It's called Putting Makeup on Dead People.
Oh, yeah,
I've
yeah.
read
Okay.
it at least 6 times. I read it all the time. And it sold me on it. I decided literally that day that I was going to be a mortician, and I didn't stray from it. And so 3 days after my 18th birthday, I moved to Portland, Oregon. I was so ready to move on with things. I took a couple gap years just because I needed time to get used to being an adult.
Plus COVID.
That, yeah, and online classes I've learned are not for me, so I needed to wait till it was in person again. But once everything was back to normal, I applied, I got in. I started my apprenticeship before I even got into school, and I buckled down, I was ready to go. But it's kind of cool that most people don't figure out they want to be in this industry until they're like well into their 30s. I'm like one of the youngest people in my entire class, but I just knew at 14 it just made sense.
Why is it that people wait so long, do you think?
Well, I think it really comes down to the fact that who in their right mind in high school thinks I'm going to go to school to embalm dead people. Like it's not a career that people think about that's cool, but then as people get older, they have a different relationship with death and it makes more sense to them. And so they are able to go into the industry, whereas young people have these big dreams of going to be a surgeon or a doctor or a lawyer, like normal things that kids think about, or a teacher. Like they have very normal goals, but a lot of people are not exposed to death like I was as a kid. But I feel like because I was exposed to death in like middle school and high school so much, it was a pretty easy decision. Not all of my teachers really understood. It was kind of weird.
Yeah.
Because people usually don't want to go into that industry. Usually it takes like a big awakening for people to go into it. But for me, it was a book.
Do you feel that a lot of people in your class are like nurses? Like they've been in the medical industry for a long time and they just felt they'd rather work with dead people than alive people kind of thing? Or
I know quite a few of them came from backgrounds like that. I think we all come from quite different backgrounds. Some people grew up with parents who ran funeral homes, so they're in the program. Some of them, started as cosmetologists or medical personnel. Some of them didn't really have an idea of what they wanted to do until now. It really depends, but because it's the only mortuary school in the Pacific Northwest, we all come from very different backgrounds, and it's kind of an interesting bunch of people. It's a lot of different people from different places, but I can say that I'm probably the only, if not one of the only people in that class that has wanted to do this since I was 14. That's very not typical for that class.
well, even just in general with, I think, careers, when you're 14, you don't know what the heck you're gonna do. Like I wanted to be a teacher, I think, at 14, something like that. And I guess I am a teacher in a sense because I'm a mom now. But then I went to college. My major was history.
That's so funny.
Like,
I actually didn't know that.
oh, really?
I don't think you ever told me your major.
Well, because I didn't care about college. Like,
Yeah.
we're in an entirely separate room right now, and Gigi can still come through.
She's having a good time.
Yeah, so yeah, when I went to college, I was doing my generals, and I had a job where I had to sit with this gal overnight, and I made some good money. Like, at the time, it was really good money. It was like $15 an hour as a straight out of high school kid, and so that's how I paid for my first semester at NIC.
Yeah.
For my major, I had to claim a major, like a temporary one, and it was history.
Huh.
So, yeah.
Well, I mean, we definitely don't share that in common. I've failed every history class I've ever taken. But...
Well, and I ended up not even finishing college, like, because you don't have to be certified to be a medical assistant up here.
Yeah, and you also don't need to be certified to be a mom. Like, you
Well,
don't
true that.
need to take college classes to be a mom. And I
Right.
feel like when you were younger, it was your goal to be a mom. I remember you talking about it a lot.
Yeah.
It was never really my goal to be a mom. I feel like this was more prevalent in my life. And I think that's something that's kind of important to keep in mind when we're talking about this stuff, is that I think moms are superheroes, but I feel like some people were just made to be moms and some people were made to be doing other things. And for me, this was what I was put on earth to do. I truly believe that I was put here to care for people who can no longer care for themselves. And I think that we definitely were different in that sense as kids. And I've met the most wonderful mothers, like, because this podcast is about moms. I've met just the most wonderful mothers, and I think they are just superheroes. And all of them talk to me about how when they were a kid, they wanted to be a mom. That was their goal. And that's how I felt about being a mortician. It kind of just clicked. And I know that's weird to people because most people want to be a mom or a teacher or something. That just wasn't me. So I think it's really cool that both of us grew up and did exactly what we wanted to do as kids.
Yeah.
We're both on the path that we needed to be.
Huh?
Take the keys.
The car keys?
Yeah, I'm gonna need to go for a drive. Sorry for the interruption.
Oops, sorry. Are you taking Finn with you?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Have fun.
Thanks.
No, love you. Okay. Yeah, so I remember you talking about it, and when you would talk about it when we were younger, I kind of knew it would stick.
Did you?
Yeah. I just had this thing, I'm like, yeah, she's kind of perfect for that. Like, even then, You seem, because in my mind, I was still kind of fitting with the stereotypes of a mortician, like
Yeah.
scary vampire type person. And
Which
we were
surprising-
that in high school, though.
Yes, surprisingly, that's a very incorrect stereotype.
Oh,
You-
totally. Yeah.
Yeah, but I thought the same thing when the word mortician came to mind.
Right, but you fit that bill
I
in
did.
high school. You were
did.
like, ew, don't touch me
Yeah.
ever, peasant.
Yeah.
Like, and it was just funny. I'm like, yeah, okay, I can see that. Like, totally, I could totally see that. So, but I think that as you've grown, you've really started to, I think, develop the empathy that's needed for it. Partly because of our experiences with having so many people die in our life, which I didn't know was not a normal thing.
Oh, me neither. That
Like-
was like, I was shocked when I found out that people went to their first funeral at like 23.
Yeah,
Like my first funeral was 3 years old.
right.
So
I think mine was like 7, which was Auntie Jeannie.
Yeah, that was my first funeral too.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure we went to some before that. They just like wasn't our family members.
Well, I remember with Auntie Jeannie, I had asked like, "Oh, can I say some words?"
Did you?
At 7. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I asked Shani. I was like, "Can I say some words about Auntie Jeannie?" And
Oh.
she was like, "Well, not at this one, but there's a ceremony in like Seattle, I think maybe, that you can come and say some words if you want." And I was like, "Okay." I never did.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 7.
Maybe you should have been the funeral director.
No, I don't think I'm like cut out for that. I'm kind of creeped out by it. Like,
Most people are. Yeah.
excuse. Oh yeah, just for everyone, I am sick right now. Very sick. I've been sick for like a week and a half. So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, no, I mean, I'm fascinated by it. I just don't think I could do it like all the time.
Well, most people can't. I feel like a lot of people who think that they can end up not being able to. It takes a very specific type of person to be in this industry. And when I first got into it, there were some things that I was freaked out by too. Like, it took me a really long time to grasp quite a few things in the industry.
For example,
A lot of it. I feel like I was never that intimate with death. My first job was as an admin, and I would go through files, and it kind of freaked me out that I was probably the last person that was ever going to see those unless they were like pulled later on.
like the death certificates or
Stuff like that. All of their paperwork, it's all kept in a file, and I feel like that the admin side of things freaked me out a lot more than like school, surprisingly.
why?
Because I feel like seeing it on paper is a lot different than just seeing a decedent or anything. I feel like seeing it on paper is very real. So when you have a packet and it's someone's life in a packet, it kind of freaked me out a little bit. That was kind of a reality that I had to kind of understand better. And
Is it like medical records or
No.
like what would when you say that it's like someone's life in a packet, what does that mean?
So when they're doing funeral arrangements, so because I was an admin, I wasn't doing the funeral arrangements. The funeral directors were. They would have, there's documents that you have to sign in order to perform dispositions. So if they're being cremated, you have to sign a cremation authorization. If they're being embalmed, you have to sign an embalming authorization. They had to put the death certificate. And then on the folder, they write all of the information that's going to be put on the death certificate, because they sign the top part and they fill in the top part. So it was like their name and like their full name they require, like the middle name and everything, their highest level of education, their occupation, like all of these details about their life, like even like their parents' names.
Oh, I was gonna
so
ask that.
You can like go back in for like genealogy purposes. And I think that kind of freaked me out, because that's like the last documentation of that person, really. Like, obviously there's like lawyer paperwork and like, you know, life insurance, etc. But that's like the last legal documentation of that person. You have a birth certificate, and then at the end of life you have your death certificate. And it kind of felt like when I was closing that file, I was kind of closing that person's life. And that, I know that sounds morbid, I was very reverent with it. I know most people would look at it as just a file, but I really felt quite honored that I was able to close someone's life like that. And I think about them all the time. I don't want people to forget about them because I just closed that file. So I think about them all the time. And there were times where I would just go home and cry because it was like this weight of closing over 100 files in a day. And these, to me, were not files. These were people.
Yeah.
And I was closing these files for people. And I tried not to look at like the death certificate in too much detail. I knew that that was going to be hard for me, and I tried not to think about it too much. But at the end of the day, when you've closed that many files and you've seen that many names, it makes things a little bit more real. Like, death isn't just this thing that happens every once in a while. It's this thing that happens every single day, all the time. And that was probably the hardest part for me starting my job. It was never the gore aspect. It was never the sadness. It was the fact that at the end of the day, we closed that file and they were kind of gone. And that was something that took me a really long time to really grasp onto. Now it's not as hard for me. I kind of got used to it, but at first it was, as a 19-year-old, it does get a little bit shocking.
Well, and I was thinking about, I would think about that actually, that same thing when we'd go to like Yates Funeral Home with our family members, and even the most recent with our friend Sarah Grant. Like we knew this person, we loved this person, like they were a huge part of our life, but to these funeral directors, it's kind of like a drop in the bucket, you know? And so I think like, oh, they have a crucifix up right now, but they probably have something for, Buddhists. They probably have something for, I don't know, Hindus, you know, different cultures. So like you had talked to me about that. So do you guys just have like a closet full of different cultural things, or well, in regards to schooling, I guess, like, do you guys have specific symbols that you learn about?
Kind of, yeah. So I just took a sociology class. Like, it's funeral service sociology. It's not just sociology.
What is the difference?
So sociology is like the study of humans and human behavior, whereas funeral sociology is the same thing, but as it pertains to the funeral service. So as it's kind of how the funeral service has changed over the years, how it's influenced, how human behavior is at funeral services. But about half the class was just learning about other cultures, because realistically speaking, as funeral directors and embalmers, we're kind of expected to know everything about everyone. Regardless of what culture, you're kind of just expected to know that. So we have to learn about it. And it really comes down to, if a Catholic family per se comes in and they want a funeral, you have to understand the parts of that funeral. You have to understand that you're going to be working with a priest. You have to understand that you're going to have probably a Catholic mass, and you're going to have, you know, a vigil typically. You have to understand all those parts. Whereas if you're serving a Hindu family, you have to be aware that typically they're cremated within 24 hours. And have to be aware that a lot of times they want to witness the cremation and there's going to be a priest there. I learned recently that water is very sacred to them. So there's a lot of water involved in the service. Like, you have to know these little things in order to serve families correctly. I think it's really important to go into these and kind of have that base knowledge of these.
Do they pour water on the decedent when they put them in the cremating?
So I've never seen the actual cremation take place in a crematory, because it's kind of different here in the US than it would be in other places where they may live, because it's a bit more westernized, I'd say. So, traditionally, they had a like sacred cremation ground, and they would cremate their decedents on that ground, and then they would put them in a body of water. They'd put the cremated remains in this body of water.
Oh, okay.
Whereas in the U.S., it's a little bit different because they don't have that specific body of water, so they just put it in a body of water.
Oh, okay.
I do know that a lot of Hindu families will pour water into the decedent's mouth either as they're dying or right after for purification purposes. That part may not necessarily pertain to us because we're kind of the after, like after that happens. But it's still important to know the ritual before death as well, to kind of put it into perspective and understand what this family went through. And then we can kind of move towards the death rituals. And people don't want to sit there and explain it to you. They don't want to tell you how to do your job, which is why when you're becoming a mortician and you go through these classes, they teach you a lot about a lot of different cultures, because we need to be ready to do anything, and we need to understand that. Because imagine if we did end up serving a Hindu family and we didn't know that they cremate within 24 hours and we didn't call them for 24 hours, and then it's too late. If we weren't prepared for that, or say if they came in and we were like in a state of shock because they told us that they wanted to cremate within 24 hours, you have to be ready for these situations, especially if you're going to be a funeral director in the United States, because we have so many different cultures all around here. So there's a good chance that if you're going to be a funeral director or an embalmer in this country, you're going to see a handful of different cultures regardless of what area you live in.
So, with different cultures, I guess, because you have a Catholic background, how do you feel about learning about these different, like, does Catholicism seem pretty cut and dry, like, comparatively to these cultures? Like, what do you, like, not cut and dry, but, like, does it seem like more tame, I guess?
No.
Because it's more Western,
Absolutely not. No.
Really?
My opening sentence to my final project in my sociology class was, the Catholic funeral rite is typically a funeral director's worst nightmare. And I don't say that because I think it's a bad thing. I think it's beautiful. I love being able to learn about Catholic services in school. However, there's a lot more steps to it than in a lot of different funeral rites. And I think that's wonderful. I love being able to do that, but it really is a lot. And if I didn't have the Catholic background that I have, I would be terrified of them, because you have to understand all of the different parts. And then when you go to Mass, imagine going to a funeral Mass without knowing what's going on. It's kind of scary.
Especially in Latin.
Exactly. If it's very traditional, and that's really hard for a lot of people to get past, especially if they didn't have a Catholic background. It's hard for them to know what they're supposed to be doing. There's a lot of standing and kneeling, and there's communion. I've met funeral directors that didn't know whether you should go up and receive communion or not. Like, there's quite a few different things that are kind of scary about Catholic services for someone who doesn't have that background.
Right.
And there's a lot of steps. One thing I will say that I love about Catholic services is that there is a right way and there is a wrong way, and that you don't find that very often. A lot of other funeral rites are very like, you could do it this way or you could do it this way, and that's wonderful that they're adaptive, that you can do it quite a few different ways. However, Catholicism really tells you exactly how to do your job. Like, if I need to know how to do my job when I'm a funeral director, all I have to do is call up a priest and they'll tell me exactly how to do my job. There's not a whole lot of thinking involved at that point, because it's just told to me. Like, there's certain things that I have to do. I have to remember to bring a crucifix. I have to remember how to unfold the pall. Like, there's quite a few things that go into it. However, I feel like it's nice that there is essentially a rule book for it.
What is a pall?
The pall is the sacred covering that is put over the casket during a Catholic funeral rite. So typically I think in the Latin Mass, it's black.
Yes.
In the Nova Soto Mass, it's white. It usually has a cross on it. And these are generalizations. Sometimes it might not be white. But from what I've learned in school, typically it is white. There's a cross on it, and the casket is in the back at the start of the service, and the funeral director helps the priest put the pall on to cover the entirety of the casket, which sounds easier than it is. The pall is very big, and the priest will help and like fold it a certain way so it's easy to put on, but it's really easy to get confused as to what end goes where, and it takes a couple times to kind of get used to. I've seen it done a few times. I've watched it, and but that is a big deal in the Catholic Church. That is one of the main things that they teach in school to be aware of. They teach about the pall, they teach about the rosary, they teach about the Requiem Mass, the Vigil, quite a few different things. The scapular was another thing that was really important for us to learn because
interesting.
Typically we take off personal effects. Like you're taught to take off personal effects of someone when they pass away to return to the family. So we learn in mortuary school, if you see someone with a scapular, leave that part on unless the family specifies otherwise, because it's really important for people to be buried with that scapular or cremated with that scapular. So there's certain aspects, but because I grew up with it, I feel like it's not as bad for me.
Yeah, like you're talking to me and it's like common sense to me that you leave a scapular on and all of, the rosary, things like that. And so, but I can imagine that it would be really stressful for someone that doesn't know what a scapular is. Like, what do you look for? It's just like, because I mean, I know some people that have like five different necklaces on, so it's like, how do you know what a scapular looks like? Things like that. And so it's just, no, but I do think that it's really cool that you know that. It probably makes your job a lot easier, and learning about it a lot easier too. Just because you have that background. But I think that it would be hard for me to like participate, I guess, in other people's culture in a sense. Like, I don't know, maybe that's just because of my background, but like I'd be interested to see it for sure.
I think for me, I feel really lucky that I get to go to these services, because although maybe I don't understand everything, I feel like it is so nice of people to allow us as funeral professionals to be part of such a sacred ritual. Like, a lot of cultures don't really let outsiders into the funeral service because they have like sacred spaces. And the fact that because I'm going to school for this, I'm going to be allowed to partake in those and allowed to be part of that, it makes me feel special in a way. And I don't say that as in I'm better than everyone else. I say that as in it is so nice of people to trust me with their culture and with their lives, because a lot of these people maybe aren't part, or they haven't grown up in the Pacific Northwest, and they grew up somewhere else where maybe their culture was more common, and now it must be so hard for them to not have that readily available. So it's probably scary for them to meet me. I would assume that it's scary to let someone into your space that maybe doesn't feel like they belong there. But these are sacred rituals. These are things that are so important to them. And they feel like this is like the most important thing that they could do for their loved one. This is their final goodbye. This is their way of honoring them. And the fact that they trust me to do that is, I can't even like understand it properly. I can't believe that these people would be so willing to let me into that space. And so I try to be very reverent and open-minded, because these are such important things. And I think it's important for me to kind of go in with an open mind and go in with that reverence. And it's important for all funeral professionals to go into every single environment with the same reverence that they would have with their own religion, because that's what makes a good funeral director. That is exactly what makes a good funeral director or a good embalmer. Someone who is so quick to adapt, because our job is not to be spiritual advisors.
Right.
Our job is to help people. And that's exactly what I want to do. I want to help people of all different cultures and religions, because it's not my place to tell them what to do, but it is my place to be that person for them. And as long as I can be educated in that, I feel like it'll make their lives a lot easier. I don't want them to have to sit there and explain why something is important. If it's important to them, it is absolutely important to me. 100%.
Well, and it's beautiful that you get to do that, because I think that death is the most human thing possible. Death and birth, those things are unifying, because no matter who you are, no matter what religion you are, what you believe, you're going to be born and you're going to die.
That's called a cultural universal. That's a sociology term.
Oh, it's actually a term.
Yeah, a cultural universal. It's something that is found in all cultures around the world. So every culture has a death ritual, and every culture has a way of giving birth and you know, having kids. It's something that's found everywhere, so that's why it's so important.
Right. One thing that I experienced with that, and it was a really powerful moment, so I'm sure that you can relate, but it was in regards to birth. So Finnegan was in the NICU, and it was like, I think he was like a day old, and he was in like the NICU portion, because he went to a step-down unit, which is where he doesn't need as much care as like a baby that was just born, and he was on the CPAP. He had a big mask on his face. Anyway, so we're in there, and I'm holding him, and Teddy's in there, I think, too. And in the corner of the room, because there were like 3 different babies in this room, one of the babies, I think it was a boy, his parents were there, and they were Muslim, and the mom had like a full-on burqa, you know, not covered, her face wasn't covered, but most, like, her whole body was covered, and her husband was translating for her. She didn't speak English. And he was describing to her what they were going to do for their son, and I think he had some pretty significant issues, and so I felt really sad for them, and she was crying, and she was holding him, and it was just really sad, and she left the room, but as she was leaving, our eyes met, and we locked eyes, and kind of just nodded at each other, like, we acknowledged that we're different religions entirely, but we're there for the same reason for our kids. Like, we have the same objective regardless of what religion we are. And it was really, really powerful, because it's like, I saw this mom, I didn't see different religion. Like, I wasn't afraid, you know, I wasn't like standoffish. I was just like, we're moms.
I think motherhood is very unifying, and I don't really know, because I'm not a mom, but I can say that the camaraderie that I've seen in mothers is unbeatable. Moms are always there for each other, and it's the same thing kind of in death as well, where all of these families are there for the same purpose. They're there to grieve their loved one, and it's really important that you saw that, because realistically, people are not as different as you would think. I think that we're all very divided. However, most of us are here for the same reason. And when she was in the NICU, you know, trying to make sure her baby was healthy, you were doing the same thing. It's motherhood. That's being a mom. And it's so important that people see that, and that moms are not against each other, because you're all here for the same reason. You're here to raise little tiny humans.
Right.
And I can't even fathom how you guys do that. Truly, I think moms are superheroes. I don't know how people do that. I think it's wonderful that people can raise these good little kids. And I love being around my niece and nephew. I think they're wonderful, and it's so fun to get to come visit them and watch them grow up. But I know that they have the best parents in the entire world. I think that is so important for me to say here, is that they really do have the best parents in the entire world, and I'm so glad to see that. And I'm glad to see all of these different moms that I know. They all raise their kids a little bit different, but they all turn out to be good kids. And I'm okay just being on the sidelines, rooting them on, and going to their soccer games and stuff. That's okay with me.
Well, you're doing something that I can't do, you know, so I see you doing your job, and I'm like, my gosh, that is amazing. Like, you call me about some of the things you learn in school, and I'm just like, what in the hell?
Yeah.
But then you're like, then I tell you, like, oh yeah, Finnegan pooped up his back. Like,
And I'm gagging.
yeah, like, he literally threw up on you today, and you're just like, bleh.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm just like, this is an everyday thing, you know? So it's like, we're doing two very important jobs.
Mhm.
They're equally important,
I'd
but...
say motherhood is more important.
Oh, really?
Truly, I think motherhood is probably the most important job in the entire world, because where would
Yeah.
we be without our moms?
True.
I would not be anywhere without my mom.
Yeah, I know, same. Well, both of us. I mean,
Yeah.
we have the same mom. It's funny when Emmett makes, like, your mom jokes. He's like, your mom. And I'm like, she's your mom, too.
Yeah, try again, Kate.
Yeah. But, no, moms are very important. I think that there actually was a quote that moms can make or break a society by how they raise one person.
I agree.
Like, that's a lot of, like, and I hear that and I'm like, oh, no.
It's a lot of pressure, yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge
But I
amount of
feel
responsibility.
like there's not really anywhere that you've gone wrong with
Yeah.
that. I feel like if you show your kids love and you teach them to love other people,
Right.
I don't think you can really go wrong with that kid. And being a mom is hard, I know, and there's probably a handful of mistakes that you'll feel like you made. But at the same time, I don't think they're as big of a deal as a lot of moms think. Like,
Yeah.
I think there are some things that probably my mom thinks that she made a mistake with, but I turned out fine-ish.
Right.
Like, I'm a little special, but I turned out a little bit fine. So I think it's important to keep that in consideration. Kind of think about, in the grand scheme of things, you're doing everything right. You're showing those
Right.
kids love, and you're showing them other people's love and introducing them to ideas. And that's the entire, like, premise of learning. And the biggest thing that creates, like, a child's conscience and how they develop is parental attachment. Like,
Yeah.
I literally learned that in a psychology class. Parental attachment is the biggest deal in a child's development. And as long as you're cuddling up to those kids and teaching them how to love each other,
Yeah.
that's the parental attachment that they need.
They're funny. They're funny
They're
kids.
so cute. I love them.
Oh, man. They're so hilarious. Jeej yesterday, she was like, I was changing her diaper and Finnegan was sleeping because I share a room. And I was talking in a normal tone and she's like, shh, quiet.
Oh my gosh.
She told me to
She's
be quiet.
rude.
And then she screamed.
Of course.
And it's like, practice what you preach, kid. Like, she's, oh man.
She needed you to hear her
Yeah,
scream.
Right.
She's
She's
preparing
like,
the room.
excuse me, just be quiet for a moment.
Yep.
And then, yeah.
She's so funny. She's got an ear-piercing scream, though.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it.
No, I'm pretty sure I'll be deaf by the end of, her toddlerhood.
Oh, yeah. You're going to be gray hair by 40.
Yeah.
Just like Mom. She's
Yeah.
going to do just what I did to Mom.
That's why Mom has gray hair, is because of you.
I guarantee it. I guarantee I was the one that made her hair gray.
Just immediately was like, just gray.
What other mom had to deal with a kid coming up to her at 14 years old and saying, I'm going to go work with dead people?
Well,
Nobody.
At least you weren't like, I'm gonna go. I can't think of something that's worse.
Maybe do drugs. Like,
Yeah,
I
there you
didn't
go.
say that. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
But it was kind of one of those things where, like, most parents don't have to deal with what Mom had to deal with me. I was
Right.
kind of a special kid.
Well, yeah. But I remember you and I talking after you, I think you got accepted into school, but I was like, yeah, I prefer working with live people. And you're like, yeah, I like to work with dead people. Like, it was just like,
Yeah.
when I describe you to people, I'm like, imagine the opposite of me. Like picture it in your brain, and that's my sister.
Yeah. and
Literally.
It's kind of funny that I say that because pretty much the entire job of being a mortician is dealing with alive people. And I love doing that. I love meeting people. And, when I'm a funeral director someday, I can't wait to be able to, like, meet with families and, like, sit down with them and stuff. That's exciting to me. But when people ask me why I chose to be a mortician, I kind of don't want to get into it. So I usually just say something along the lines of, I'm not very good at customer service, or I don't like talking to people. Because it's funny. Like, I'm working with dead people. That's like a comedic way to get out of it. But realistically, my job is very people oriented. Like, I'm going to school to learn about people. Like physically and mentally. And that's like when you're an embalmer, which is kind of the part that I'm more attached to. I'm more attached to the embalming side of things. I feel like you still kind of have to be a people person, and I never saw myself as a people person.
Right.
But now that I'm in this career, I really think I might be more of a people person than I thought.
100%.
I think
like your complete, like, the way that you talk to people has changed entirely from learning, like, sociology. I think that'd be cool to learn just in general for people.
It's fascinating. It's really cool, and I recommend everyone learn sociology and psychology because it's interesting to learn about why people act the way they do. And I've always had that question. I never really understood a lot of social cues.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's been helpful for me to not just know people do this weird thing, but why they do it. And the entire premise of sociology is kind of looking at the familiar as unfamiliar. For example, why do we raise our hands in class before we say something?
Oh.
It's normal to us.
Yeah.
But from a sociology standpoint, they ask, why do they do that? That's weird.
To get attention?
Well, exactly. Or it's a norm. That's just what people do. That's what we're taught to do. But it's kind of fascinating learning, like, why people do things and looking at it from a perspective where, like, I see this thing every day, but why do we do it? Why is it like that? And that
weird.
was super interesting to me. I love sociology. It is so fascinating, and if I didn't end up going into this career, I know that I'd end up in sociology somewhere because I think it's so cool.
Well, so when you're learning sociology in regards to funeral directing, is it like grief processing, or?
Not really. It was a lot about family dynamics. It was about how the funeral industry changed through modernization and what parts of it changed and why the industry is the way it is. A lot about, like, different, like, power dynamics in families, like a matriarchal family versus a patriarchal family. Because when you're meeting with families, you kind of have to understand that type of stuff.
Right.
And it was a very, like, base level of sociology. Like, if anyone listening to this has gone further into sociology, I'm very sorry. I'm probably using the wrong words because I'm telling you it was, like, base level, like, sociology for dummies, but it was fascinating to me. And I did a lot more research after the class. Like, I looked up a lot of things because I thought that is really cool. And I do think that in the future, if I ever decide to go back to college, that's exactly what I go to college for. Because I think I have always looked at people like a sociologist would. I always look at people like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
I think people are so weird. I people watch all the time. I just think people are so weird, but in the best way. I think it's so fascinating. So that was probably my favorite part of going to mortuary school, is getting to learn why people do the things they do,
Right.
and how people are spread out and how people act in different cultures. That was so cool to me, and I'm probably going to end up using it every day when I'm a mortician.
Yeah.
But it was good information for anyone to have.
Do you feel like our family is more matriarchal or patriarchal?
I'd say we're an egalitarian family.
What is that?
Egalitarian means that everyone in the family has some sort of say.
Oh, okay.
I would say we're less of an egalitarian family because in an egalitarian family, the kids also have a say. And I'd say mom and dad definitely do have power in the family, which is not a good thing or a bad thing. That's just how a family dynamic is. But I would say that mom and dad equally share the power in the family, so I wouldn't say it's either. I think if I had to choose one, we'd probably lean closer to patriarchal, just because that's, dad is the head of the household. but I do see mom doing things. She's not always like on the back burner. They make decisions together, which I feel is extremely beneficial for a family.
Do you feel when there are different cultures, like the dynamic changes in like within a culture, does it change from family to family? Like, for example, could one family be more patriarchal comparatively to another, or is it pretty universal for different cultures?
I think it's different for every single family. We learned a lot about how like it kind of depends on the family size and the type of family. For example, an extended joint family would be more likely to be patriarchal, whereas a nuclear family might be more likely to be egalitarian.
Extended joint family is
Extended joint family is when there are parents and all of their kids, except for their married daughters. So they have all their kids, and then the men in the family will get married and they'll be part of that family. But when the women get married, they go to like the husband's family. So it's like it's kind of like it. To me, it reminds me of like farmer families.
Oh, okay.
Like back in the day, like when they had all like the men who were farmers and then their wives would come and like move in with them. They're typically more patriarchal statistically speaking, whereas I'd say a nuclear family, like a modern nuclear family, they might be egalitarian, but they could be anything. Like
Okay.
it depends, and I never really assume, because we learn in class that everyone is kind of different, and it's really important for us to just go in with an open mind. If we notice that maybe the point of contact is the mom or the point of contact is the dad or something like that in that regards, then we kind of have an idea of how the family dynamic is, and then we can
Right.
work with it. And I'd say
Okay.
it's not like we treat them differently. It'll make more sense to us. We
Right.
know how to act.
So, when you are studying to do embalming, do you have like a class per week where you just embalm a person, or like do you only do it once in school?
So next year is more of the embalming portion of
Oh,
things,
okay.
and I'll be full-time in school 4 days a week in person. So they have a lot of different classes. So they have like cremation 101 or like embalming or embalming chemistry, like quite a few different. And from what I've heard from the second years, I don't think it's every week that you get to embalm someone. You get to observe a lot of embalmings. You do a couple. But I will say that typically speaking, you learn more in your apprenticeship than you do in school. And I am looking to get an embalming apprenticeship at some point next year. I'm not at that point yet. I want to kind of get my foot in the door and kind of understand embalming a little bit more than I'm before I'm actually like actively doing it, because
Right.
that's terrifying.
Right.
But odds are I'll learn a lot during my apprenticeship, and at that point an apprentice can do ultimately anything an embalmer can do. They just are under someone else's license. Kind of same with like funeral directing. If you're a funeral director apprentice, you can do anything a funeral director can do except for sign death certificates, because that's a legal document. So when I'm in my embalming apprenticeship, that's ultimately where you learn how to embalm. You'll know like the chemistry for it and what the chemicals mean and stuff, because that needs to be taught by a professor. But that's where you really learn, and it's important to have like a good mentor. So I'm looking into that, but eventually I will be looking at embalmings more often. I've
Right.
definitely kind of gotten into it a little bit, and they give us opportunities even as first years to watch embalmings. But I'll be more hands-on next
Right.
year.
So, I actually have some questions here.
Great.
Let me see. This one, let me just pull it up. Come on. Oh, here we go. Okay. So this one is from Elisa. She says, "What are some misconceptions people have about the industry, that you would like to set straight?"
I could name 100 of them. First of all, and you kind of mentioned this at the beginning of this, morticians are not little, like, creepy Grim Reaper vampires. In fact, most of the morticians that I've met are literally, like, parents, like middle-aged parents, and it was kind of shocking when I got in the industry and I was expecting to see these, like, creepy goth people, and I was greeted with, like, a man in a suit, like a bald man in a suit who looked like he could be my uncle. Like, that typically morticians are so normal looking. Like, I couldn't have piercings at work. I'd have to take those out. No tattoos showing, like, very normal looking, and that was kind of shocking to me. Another thing that I can think of is that morticians don't make a lot of money, and I think a lot of people are under this conception that funeral directors are thieves, and the prices are expensive because they just want money, and they're living really well and making all this money off of grieving families. The typical wage in the state that I'm from for morticians is about $25 an hour, and that's for someone who's dual licensed. And to put that kind of into perspective, I'm spending about $20,000 on schooling.
Yeah.
And I live in a metro area where rent for a studio apartment is close to $1,500. And I'm going to be making $25 an hour at a good company, a company that's willing to pay me more. The people who are making all of this money are the funeral home owners and corporate companies. So they're the ones that are making this money. It's not the funeral director. The person that you're talking to, or the person embalming your loved one, they're not living good. I guarantee they're going home to a studio apartment most of the time.
Wow.
Or they're living with someone else. Like, that's the reality of the situation. And I want people to know that we're not in this because we think we're making bank. We're not in it because we're making so much money and we're swimming in it. Every single person in this industry, well, maybe minus a few who maybe were forced to do it, but most people in this industry are in it because we care about people, we care about the families, and we care about the deceased.
Yeah.
And we are just the type of people who are able to do this. This is such a special thing for us to do, and we're all in it because we want to. It's not because we're getting paid enough. Truthfully speaking, if I wanted to be swimming in money, I'd be in the wrong career right now. I would quit my job. But it's like a huge misconception that I hear all the time. Every time I tell people I'm going to school for this, they're like, "Oh, you're going to make a lot of money." And I'm like, I really wish you were right. I do.
Yeah.
But I'm not. I'm probably going to have a roommate for the rest of my life. So
Yeah, when he told me that, I was like, you guys deserve a lot more, for sure. I mean, you're dealing with some pretty heavy stuff.
Sure, and we're also exposed to deadly chemicals, and a lot of embalmers get cancer by the time they're in, like, their 50s. But,
my gosh.
you know, $25 an hour is enough to get cancer. That's fine.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy. This is from Jessica. I think there's a few of them. Is there any part of your job that grosses you out, or like what you've learned?
There's quite a few things that I've learned and seen that have grossed me out. There's a couple that are kind of weird for me because embalming is not pretty.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people that I've met say they literally passed out their first embalming. It was disgusting to them, and I sleep like a baby after I watch embalming. It's not scary for me, but there are, like, a specific weird things. For example, and this is something that I was thinking about recently that I learned in school, and it's putting earrings in people's ear. And that sounds so stupid, but when someone doesn't wear earrings for a long time, their ears close up. But if you need to put earrings in, you need to put earrings in.
Oh.
And you just pop them on through. And that's it shouldn't be a gross thing to me, but for me it just I don't like it. That part is weird to me. There's the pretty average things that gross people out, like when decedents purge. So any liquid from your body will come out of, any orifice that you have, like your nose, your mouth, like liquid will come out. Every embalmer is kind of icky with that. And it's pretty standard, but the earring thing was something I was not expecting to be grossed out by. Sometimes learning about setting the features kind of grosses me out. I think anything to do with the face kind of freaks me out a little bit, but it's not grossed out to where it's like I'm not gonna do that or I don't want to watch it. It's just like sometimes my heart races a little faster and like I kind of maybe gag a little bit, but you get used to it. It's just when you're in school and you're first learning about all this stuff, it's the initial shock of, oh, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
Because people don't know, but I feel like once I'm actually like in the career more, I won't be as grossed out by it, but while I'm in school and I see it very rarely, it freaks me out.
So you had mentioned to me like closing the mouth is kind of gross for you?
Yeah, so that's part of setting the features. So there's quite a few different ways that you can close the mouth. The typical way that people do it is they take a suture with some thread. Sometimes it's dental floss. And they go through under your tongue, kind of. Keep in mind, I've never done this myself, so this is just based off what I've seen. So this could be incorrect. This is what I've seen. So they go in through that bottom of your mouth, and they go out of the chin, and then they go back in through that hole, and then they go up through the top of your mouth, and then they suture it shut. So they're not sewing the lips together. I see a lot of horror movies where it's like the lips are sewn together. That's not how it's done. You're sewing the jaw together. And that has kind of bothered me a little bit just because I'm not a fan of noises. I can watch a lot of things, but noises are like kind of freaky to me. So that was something that in school I kind of had to get past because that's like one of the big things that you learned. It's not to set the features. That's like a big deal. And I admittedly, a lot of people probably think I'm like a fraud in my class because I was kind of grossed out by it. But it's just one of those things that I have to get past. I maybe wear earbuds or something.
How do you like set the eyes?
So we have this thing, and it's called an eye cap. And the way that I would describe it is a spiky contact. You can look it up and see pictures. It's a piece of plastic.
What is it called again?
It's an eye cap.
Oh, an eye cap.
So you take it and you open the eye and you put it in the eye and then you close the eye over it. And the spikes kind of grip onto the eyelid a little bit so it stays closed. Because when you die, your eyes kind of retract a little bit. They open a little bit. They don't look like they used to. And then your mouth is open. So we set the features to make someone look more peaceful because no one wants to see that. I didn't see that until I got into school. Like, I went into school without even seeing someone who was freshly passed away like that. I didn't know that it looked like that. So setting the features is just a way to make someone look maybe a little bit more like they looked when they were alive, just so that the families have that moment without having to deal too much with the reality of death.
Jeez.
It's not it's kind of gross.
Yeah.
Admittedly, it's kind of gross.
Jeez.
But yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. After working in this field, this is still from Jessica. After working in this field, is there a specific way you want to be handled when you die?
I battle with this all the time because despite being in this industry and learning so much about it, sometimes I still can't picture myself dying, and I that's my own like denial, I guess. But
yeah.
I think first of all, I learned after watching my very first embalming that I don't want to be embalmed. As much as I love to do it and I don't see a problem with it, I don't want to be on a table like that. It freaks me out. I that's not me.
Yeah.
I think I'm a little bit more drawn to cremation because I feel like people could have, a necklace or something with my cremated remains or something. But the way that I think about it is that it's more for the living than it is for me, and I have to take into account all these different people and how they might need to grieve. I looked a lot into alkaline hydrolysis, which is aqua cremation. You're cremated with water and chemicals. I thought that was kind of cool.
What is that exactly? Like, what is... I mean, I guess I know kind of the difference, but, like, what goes into that?
Water and chemicals. So,
Right.
cremation is fire, and you're in a retort with fire and air.
Does it make ashes, though, or...
Kinda, yeah. It's like a very fine powder. You get ashes back, but you also get, like, this, like, liquid back. But they don't give that to the families. It just comes out of it. And I actually... a really long time ago, I met a mortician who said she used it to water her plants, and she said it made them grow so quickly.
Like, of a random person, or a person that she knew?
I think it was a person she knew.
Okay, good.
I think they're not allowed to take that stuff. That's illegal.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like,
no.
you can't just take that stuff home.
And I don't even remember who told me that. It was years ago. It was the first time I heard about alkaline hydrolysis. And it was so fascinating to me. But I do like alkaline hydrolysis. It's one of the more eco-friendly ways to go. I've also looked into green burial a little bit, which is burial without an environmental impact. But I don't see myself being buried. I feel like I'm very claustrophobic, and I know I won't be in there anymore. But I just, it's not me. I don't want to be in a mausoleum or in a burial site. I'm just like, that makes me nervous.
This is kind of a weird question, and then I'll get back to Jessica's questions, but, like, why don't we just bury people in the ground, period? Like, why do we do coffins, I guess?
So, that green burial is kind of like that, like, there are some green burial sites where you can just put someone exactly, like, straight into the earth, and that's actually a lot of Islamic families like to do that. It's important to them, or it's important to them to be, like, one with the earth, like, go straight back how they used to be, very natural. The reason that we have coffins is, so first of all, they're called caskets now, and casket, I think the definition was like, it was like supposed to be a box for precious jewelry, like it came from another word that meant that. And people used that because they were under the impression a long time ago that it would keep someone from decomposing because they were airtight. So they would sell these caskets, and they were like, this will keep your loved one from decomposing because it's airtight and it's gonna keep them like preserved. Which, if you didn't know, that's straight up not true. That's straight up a lie. They just said that. So people started doing that. Another reason is if you're embalmed, those chemicals are really harmful to the environment. So they'll leak into the water. So a lot of people are under the impression that burying someone is going to send, like, all these, like, bodily fluids straight into the water, which, again, there's some flaws with that. Like, there's some flaws with that mindset, because it's not always the case. Like, we've been burying our dead since, like, the beginning of time.
Yeah.
So I don't know why all of a sudden we have to put them in a box. And then the third thing is the vault. So the vault is what you put the casket into a cemetery. The vault is like the concrete liner. Sometimes it's not concrete.
What?
So cemeteries, the casket doesn't go directly into the ground typically. It goes into a vault. So they dig the 6 feet, and then the vault company puts in, like, a concrete vault.
Wait, there's, like, an actual company that that makes concrete boxes for this?
There's several, but there's multiple. It kind of depends.
Well, yeah, but like, that's a person's job to, like, make that.
The vault guy. That's what I call them, the vault guys. And the vault guys come and install the vault in the cemetery. And at first, I really thought, I was like, whose stupid idea was it to have, like,
a box in a box?
Yeah, I was like, that is so weird. But then I learned that it's because specifically in the Pacific Northwest, and they do this everywhere, but it's very prevalent in the Pacific Northwest, because of the weather and because it's so wet, the ground caves in. So these concrete vaults kind of keep it level so we can have these nice
Oh.
cemeteries. So that was another thing that was interesting, but they also kind of believed that like kept people from decomposing. For a long time people thought that embalming kept people from decomposing forever, which it does preserve them, but there were a lot of misconceptions that we kind of just ran with and kept,
Yeah.
which is why now people are trying to go back to green burial. But a lot of cemeteries will require you to have a casket of some sort. So for green burials, typically they'll just choose like a bamboo casket or a pine casket or something made out of something that can decompose.
Like a biodegradable one.
Yeah, exactly. And they'll wrap them in a biodegradable shroud. And there's even something now called human composting. And this was legalized in Oregon and Washington recently, where they put people in pods, like pods in like.
What is that noise? Sorry.
Sounds like coffee.
Oh, they're grinding coffee.
Um,
We're at my parents' house right now.
So they put people in these pods and they put like biodegradable material, like kind of like plants and soil and stuff. And there's this beautiful ritual, and families come in, and there's a lot that goes into it. I'm not super educated on it, but I do follow a lot of their accounts on social media just to learn about it.
Yeah.
They have these beautiful rituals, and people can put like drawings and stuff in there if it's compostable paper.
Oh,
and
cool.
they put them in, and they turn them every once in a while. They turn the pod, and after 30 days, the entire body turns back into soil.
Oh.
So it's 100% eco-friendly. And people can even use the soil in their garden. The family can ask for the soil back. And it's a really cool thing where, like, we're kind of trying to minimize our footprint here. Because when you think about it, we're burying tons and tons of metal and concrete and embalming fluids and plastic into the earth. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I think for some people it's necessary, but for people like me, I really don't want my death to have an impact on the environment.
Right.
I feel like I already have enough impact being alive. I probably use more straws than anyone in the entire world. I'm sure I've killed the entire ocean by this point. So the least I can do is maybe like be nice when I die.
I almost feel like that is way more in alignment with like a Catholic Catholic teaching. Well, so like not Catholic teaching, but I feel like so on Ash Wednesday, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I feel like that's more consistent with what
You
that
would think
is.
so.
I don't know that, like, I know that there are rituals, and so I 100% understand why we do what we do, but
Yeah.
that sounds almost like perfect for Catholic teaching.
Well,
in a sense.
surprisingly, Jewish families and Islamic families are much more conscious about that stuff.
Oh.
Like, Islamic families are not allowed to be embalmed. Jewish families are not allowed to be embalmed as well. Islamic families will not even authorize for an autopsy unless it's 100% necessary.
Wow.
So, surprisingly, Catholic families don't always have the least impact on the environment, which is not a bad thing. It's just a reality. That's just how it typically is. So I'd say it is, it does match with the Catholic teachings, but typically Catholics are a lot more traditional, and I think that really goes back to when Catholic cemeteries were first put into place, and it was like a big deal, and they were like overcrowded, and they started like kind of like certain funeral homes, I'm sure, and like land companies were probably making money off of this because it was like Catholics have to bury. What if we make them bury with other things?
Right.
And so it was and I'm just speaking as like what I think happened. I'm sure it was kind of a money grab where certain people were like, oh, well, Catholics have to bury. What if we sold them this, and then we sold them this? It's not the Catholics that did that. I'm saying maybe the funeral homes and the other people involved maybe kind of saw it as an opportunity, and that could totally not be the case. But from what I'm seeing and what I'm learning, it kind of sounds like maybe it was more like they saw an opportunity
Right.
to sell and they sold.
Well, so, and I don't know if you've learned this in your classes, but like, how, if you're burying all these caskets, like, wouldn't it eventually get to the point where there's no more space?
We are running out of space. We are so close to running out of space. In the UK, there's very close to no space. This could be an incorrect statistic, but I read somewhere that like in like 10 years, the UK is not going to have burial space anymore. In New Orleans, they have above ground burials.
Yeah.
And they let someone decompose for like 5-10 years, and then after that someone else buys the plot, they push them back and they put a new person in. We are
Where do they put the body in New Orleans?
above ground mausoleums.
No. Oh, so they put him underground for 5 years and then they put him in a mausoleum?
Above ground. They put one person above ground in the mausoleum, and then once they're decomposed to like just bones, they push it back and they put another casket. There's like 6 people in some of those mausoleum crypts. We are in a space crisis right now.
What?
Because
Wait, the bones just stay in that mausoleum?
yes, and they add the other name. They add another name to the crypt.
Weird.
And it's pretty common. It's more common in New Orleans. But we're in a space crisis, and green burial could kind of help with that, because once someone decomposes, you can bury another person. You're not going to run out of space if it's organic material that's breaking down.
Right.
Whereas for us, we're putting all this like material into the ground that's never going to go away, and we are going to run out of space. That's why cremation was this big deal for people, because they assumed it was more environmentally friendly, which it's not, but it is a solution to our space crisis.
Yeah.
Now we can actually cremate people and have them at home.
Crazy.
But really, people don't think about it, but when you're putting that much stuff into the environment, it really is ruining it.
Yeah.
And now we have like literal factories that are making like caskets and stuff that are putting like carbon into the air and stuff. Like, realistically, a lot of this stuff is harming the environment more than we think, which I'm not saying that people shouldn't do that, because however you decide to grieve is the right way to grieve. However, for people who are more environmentally conscious and that's important to them, it's important to offer them options. So I did a lot of research on green burial and different methods that can kind of reduce that impact, because for me, after single-handedly destroying the environment during my 20 years of life already, like
with Starbucks,
I hate paper straws. I only use plastic straws. I'm literally evil. I didn't know how to recycle until I moved to Oregon, and everyone was recycling, and I was like, why are you guys keeping your cans? That's so weird. So now I had to learn how to recycle. I literally only use like paper plates. Like, I use paper plates, paper cups. I throw them away. I don't recycle. I'm a bad person, realistically. I'm probably like the exact like person that the earth didn't need, and then I showed up. Like the plastic cars and the plastic cups in my car right now, like in the back of my car, probably would be worth like $40 if I went into like a recycling place, because they have the little thing and it's like 25 cents per like this. Like you can,
really? You get money for that?
Well, you can bring cans and stuff to a bottle drop sometimes.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure I could pay for my college tuition if I actually recycled, because I drink everything in a container, but I just throw it away. And it's not hard to recycle in Oregon. There's a bottle drop everywhere, and I make the conscious decision every day to not do that. I just go to the dumpster and I throw it away.
But you still want to have a green burial.
Yes, I'm a bad person.
Hilarious.
I'm absolutely the worst kind of person, but also I can't wrap my mind around recycling. I feel like I'd show up and I would not know what to do.
I've never recycled, really.
I might just sell my cans to someone else who does it. Like,
sell it for an up price?
No, not an up price. Or maybe even just give it to them. Like, give them my cans. Be like, I'm an awful person and I'm sorry.
Why don't you give it to a homeless person and then they get money for that?
I do sometimes, and they do go through a dumpster sometimes because they collect the cans. But I do intend on probably saving some of them. And if someone asks, they're like, hey, can I have your can? I'm like, whatever, sure. I'm probably gonna throw it away or leave it in my car for 2 years and forget
Yeah.
it's there. So like whatever. Some people are just better than me. They understand things better than me. I'm awful for the environment. I'm probably the reason that global warming is even a thing
It's
right now.
just you.
It's straight
All
up
over the
me.
news. They're
Yeah.
like, Eliana is causing
Yeah.
this, period.
Yeah, it's like all that 3 Starbucks a day.
Yeah.
That's what it is. My bad, you guys.
Oh man, that's funny. Let's see. Okay, so this is from Jessica. Is there any scenario where you feel like you would need help doing your job?
This is probably not the answer you're looking for, but you can't move a casket by yourself. In school, well, we have so we're doing this thing at the end of the year, and I learned about this in orientation where you do mock funerals.
Okay.
It's like a fake funerals. And the job of the first years, my year.
Is there a person in the casket?
No.
Oh.
Just mock funerals. We're just like making things up. People from the community come and we plan a funeral. It's funny. It's like a little theater thing, I guess.
Oh, cool.
But the job of the first years is to move the caskets. And I heard it's kind of funny because it's like this community college campus. There's a bunch of people in suits running around pushing caskets around. But it really does like show you that caskets are so heavy. I don't know if you've ever like thought about it, but like those wooden caskets that you see literally are hundreds of pounds. And then when you put someone in it, you don't do it by yourself.
No wonder
so,
you need 6 people to carry it, generally.
Well, yeah, and like just in like reality, you can do it with 2 if you have it on a church truck. It's like a little like thing that you put it on. It's like a bungee. It bungees out and it has wheels.
Oh.
And you'll see it at services. If you're ever at a funeral service, look under the casket, see what it's on. Usually a church truck, unless they have like a stand for it. But
yeah.
if it's on a church truck, it takes 2 people, but it really is difficult to do. So there's a lot of times where I need help physically, because as strong as I am, I can't do all of that stuff myself. I think emotionally, I don't ask for help very often emotionally, because in school it's very straightforward, very, we figure it out. But I've had days where I do need to talk to someone. And before I even got a job in the industry, there were some things where I did sit down with the funeral director in the area when I was job shadowing, and I was like, this is really hard for me to understand. It makes me really sad. How do you do that? Like my biggest thing that I needed help with before I even got a job, before I even got into school, was how do you keep from bringing things home? Like, how do you emotionally leave things at work and come home and have a life? And I still struggle with that. And sometimes I ask people, like, what do you do in your free time to make you feel like your entire life is not at work?
Well, like with your admin job, I feel like you bring that home a lot, right?
A lot, all the time. There were days where I just cried. I just cried, and it was hard for me. It was really difficult for me to have all of this weight on my shoulders at such a young age and not really have an outlet because I wasn't in school yet. Now that I'm in school, it's easier because there are people around me. So if I have a bad day or something is upsetting me, I can go to one of my schoolmates and be like, have you ever gone through this? And they're like, dude, literally last week. And then we'll have a conversation about it. And that's been helpful for me. I didn't think I was going to make friends in school, but I've met a lot of really influential people. And sometimes I do show up and I'm like, do you ever have days where you just want to quit the industry and run away? And they're like, every single day. Every day. So it's nice to have that outlet. It makes things a lot better for me. And I do have people that I can ask for help with. And I have teachers. All of my teachers are really cool, and just it's different people that I can ask. And I didn't have that outlet as much before, but I'm so happy that I'm in school now, because now I'm not like doing all this alone.
Right. Yeah. I bet it helps a lot. This is from Angie. Has this industry changed your view of death and being prepared to take your trip?
Kind of. I'd say when I first started working in the industry, I barely left my house because it was so scary to me, because people would literally just like, I feel like I'd see things that were like, oh wow, that could happen to me. It was really scary. Or like I'd hear people talk about things and be like, yeah, you know, this person passed away at 19. And I was like, I'm 19 and I'm not even ready to go. Like,
Right.
it scared me. So every time I left my house, I was like, well, I can't get in my car because I could get in a car accident, and I can't go to the grocery store because I could like slip and fall and hit my head, and I can't do this, and I can't eat this, and I can't, like, there were so many, like, I can't do this because I could die. Like, it could just happen. And then as I got further in, I realized that everything could kill you.
Yeah.
Everything. You could literally, nothing could happen and you could just die.
Yeah.
And that scared me at first, but now it just makes me appreciate life more. So I went from being scared to do anything to doing anything and everything within reason. Like, I'm not going to go do drugs or something, but it's like when someone invites me to go out to a party at like 8 p.m. and I'm already in bed and I'm like, I don't want to go out, but I'm like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to have a good time. I appreciate life. I look at the stars and I look at the flowers and I watch the people around me. I like to watch like families at the grocery store and stuff, and their little kids like screaming and hanging onto the cart. I appreciate life more.
Yeah.
It makes me feel like, because I could die at any moment, that makes this so much more special for me. And I make the most of every single moment. Every moment that I experience is a gift, because there are people that didn't get to live as long as I did.
Right.
And it's important for me to live for them, and it's important for me to do the things that maybe they didn't have the chance to do. So I'm going to school, and I'm going to get my degree, and I'm going to make the most out of my life, because realistically, I don't know how much time I have. And does that scare me sometimes? Absolutely. That terrifies me. But at the same time, why should I be terrified if I'm doing everything that I can to live a life that influences others in a positive way?
Right.
And that's my entire life goal. When I pass away, I want to have so many people that I influenced, and I want to make sure that I just live long enough to at least make an influence in one person's life that could change the course of things for them.
Right. Well, you have with me. I mean,
I hope so.
Yeah.
Because I'm really tired by now. I'm 20 years old and I'm ready for retirement. So
Geriatric.
I'm elderly.
I 100% agree with you with that. Like, because of how close I got to death, I definitely appreciate it more. Like, the experiences I appreciate more, because I've kind of had this grapple with healthy eating, not because I'm like, healthy eating is a horrible thing. Like, no, you should take care of it's hard. You should take care of your body. I don't want to go full crunchy,
almond mom.
Yeah, right, exactly. But because I think to myself, why would I deny myself delicious things or really good experiences, because ultimately I'm going to die anyway, so why would I be conscious about the medicines I put in my body or the food that I eat? Obviously I'm not saying I'm going to binge eat and eat a full chocolate cake in one serving, but I'm just saying
I'm gonna eat a full chocolate cake if I want to.
It is delicious. But
Snacks.
I was just thinking, if I was to be full natural, I guess, what is that going to do? Is it going to, and so I've been grappling with that. I'm going to try it. I mean, if I can be there for my kids, that's the thing. Well, like, that's my main reason why I would do it, is to be with my kids.
But I think it really comes down to the fact that you can have everything just in smaller amounts. But the thing is, has anyone ever laid on their deathbed and they're like, what are your regrets? And they're like, that one time when I was in my 20s and I ate an entire chocolate cake. No one says that.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm taking it as that's not a bad idea.
Right.
So if I want to eat a full chocolate cake, maybe I will eat a full chocolate cake because I'm going to end up in the same casket. I'm going to end up in the same crematory. Like, obviously, I want to make sure that I'm healthy so I can live, you know, a long life if it's meant to be. However, I'm not going to go out of my way to make my life harder for things like that
Right.
when I know I'm not going to regret them, because the main things that people regret on their deathbed are not spending enough time with their family and not doing like their hobbies and not pursuing their dreams. Those are things that people regret. They don't regret that they ate a McDonald's cheeseburger instead of 10 almonds for lunch. Like, literally, people regret other things, and if I'm sitting with my family, if I get to visit my family and eat as much as I want and go do fun things with them and spend my entire paycheck in one day, I guarantee I'm not going to lay on my deathbed and be like, I regret that one day when I was 20. I just don't think so. I think it's important to be happy and value the things that you have, because it really comes down to, will I regret this when I'm dying or will I not?
Well, okay, so let me play devil's advocate then. Kind of for me too, I guess. So most people, you said, have regrets on their deathbed not spending enough time with their family. Well, what if their health choices minimize that time?
Oh, agree, absolutely. And if it ever gets to the point where you can't do the things that you love, then maybe pay attention to it, which is why I say you can have everything in small amounts.
Right. Moderation is key.
Moderation is huge, which is why I say, like, maybe at 20 years old, if I'm feeling kind of funky, I can eat a lot of cake. But, like, maybe if I'm, like, not able to walk, maybe I should, you know, work on it. And I intend on making sure that my health is to the point where I don't end up at that place. I'm pretty conscious about that, about my health choices, because I have health issues that I need to manage. And there are people who do regret it because of that, but at the same time, is eating 6 cupcakes in one sitting gonna make me like that? Because I did it. And it
Wait,
didn't make me like
recently?
that. Yes.
Like yesterday?
No. Those little baby cupcakes are evil. They're evil.
Wait, you only ate 6 of those?
Well, there's usually like 6 in a pack, the smaller packs. No, I'll be sitting there watching my show and I look down and they're gone. It's terrifying. Who's eating my cupcake?
It's a ghost.
It is.
The ghost in your apartment.
Probably.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. This is from Angie. The rest of these are from Angie. Thank you, Angie. What insights have you gained in your study of it all? I think we've kind of covered that.
Yeah, I think so. I think my entire life view has changed since discovering that I wanted to be a mortician and learning more about it. I think everything has changed and I've learned a lot, and it would take me hours to go over all of it, but it's just my views on the way that the world works are very different than before. When I was in like elementary and middle school and high school, before I truly understood, things were a lot different. Yeah. So
that kind of bleeds into this next one. Has it made your review of your own life, let's see. Has it made her take a review of her own life? This is her asking you. Opened her eyes on past and present instances and choices.
100%. I feel like I used to, and I don't think I was bad in high school, but I do think that I was very involved in drama, and I was very involved with, I guess I don't think I was always very nice to people. I was never mean. I don't think I was a very mean kid, but I think there were times where I could have taken a step back and been a lot nicer to people. And going into the industry and realizing that I don't know how much time I have left has made things like that insignificant. I don't really have drama very often. My conversations with people are very effective. I try to stay out of any arguments, and I am kind to everyone that I meet. And obviously we all slip up sometimes. Sometimes I'm, you know, in a bad mood and I won't smile at the lady at the grocery store, and then I feel bad for 2 weeks. But I feel like it has made me look back and I'm like, why was that important to me? Why did I make an effort to say something to someone that was not effective and that was hurtful.
Like you're more conscious about what you say to people?
Extremely, because I never know when the last time I'm going to talk to someone is. And if I have an argument with someone and they pass away after that, I don't think I'd ever recover from that. I don't think I'd ever feel good about myself. So I never, ever have conversations anymore that I don't feel like are effective. And if I don't feel like it's effective, I step out. And that was huge for me. It was like, I did a full like 180. My entire life changed after that, because I stopped doing things that I felt like were putting out a negative energy into the world. I started making sure that every action that I do has some positive outcome.
Yeah. Let's see here. Have you ever read the book of Tobit in the Bible? The elder Tobiah would bury the dead who were just left lying in the street despite the ruler's threats against burial.
I think I learned about it when we were getting confirmed, because one of the corporal works of mercy is to bury the dead. So I think they mentioned that. I'd have to reread it to really remember, but I do know that that is like a big thing in the Catholic Church, is that they bury their dead. And that is huge to me, because not everyone really thinks of that as an act of mercy, but realistically speaking, that's one of the nicest things that you can do for someone. That's the biggest thing that you can do for someone. Yeah, it's an act of love. When someone's dead, it's an act of love. It's saying goodbye. And I think that's wonderful about the Bible and about the Catholic Church, that they teach that, because you don't see it very often in other, maybe other cultures, which I haven't read the other spiritual books, so I don't know if they do, but I think it's very prevalent in the Catholic Church.
Right, definitely. Burying the dead is a work of mercy, which you just said. When you get married, will you quit? If you get married?
Absolutely not, no. I think that everyone is put on this world for a reason, and this was my reason. I was not put on this world to be a housewife. I was not put in this earth to be a mom. I was put on this earth to do this, and at the same time, it would kind of be a waste of time and money to spend $20,000 on school at 20 years old and then be like, I'm going to quit now that I'm getting married. Like, for some people, that's wonderful. I'm happy that they choose to do that. That's their choice. But for me, it's like, I'm 20 years old, which means if I did end up getting married, it'd probably be in the next 10 years, which I don't necessarily know if I'm going to ever get married. It's not, like, on my radar right now. But if I were to get married, it would probably be in the next 10 years. So I would be still paying off my school just to not use it. And I feel like everyone has a different vocation, and this is mine. I'm put on this earth to take care of the people who no longer can. I was not put on this earth to stay at home. In fact, nobody wants me to stay home. I can't cook. I don't do the dishes. I would sit there and sleep all day. I'd be bad at that, but I'm good at this. This is what I'm good at. And I think it's important in this world to do what you're good at and to do what you were put on this earth to do. And the second that I learned what a mortician was, I knew that I was here for a reason, and this was the reason. And I would never, ever, and this is just me, I would never, ever marry someone who expected me to quit my job for them. Ever. That would be immediately, I'd break up with them. I couldn't do it. If someone wanted me to quit my job just for them to do something else, I couldn't do it. I just wouldn't. I would pay for childcare if we had kids. I'd go out of my way to make sure that, if I needed to take like a year off to take care of kids, which I don't think I'll ever do. I don't think I'd have kids. But if I did, if I needed to do that, whatever. But I would never, ever marry someone who had the idea in their brain that this was not a forever career for me. I always make it clear to people when we're talking that my career comes first. And that's not because I don't care about people. It's because that's the job. Being a mortician, it has to be one of the first things in your life. Not the first, you can still care about your family. They're still important. However, if you get a call on Christmas Eve that someone passed away and you need to go to the funeral home, you get dressed and you go to the funeral home.
Right.
That is the job. That's exactly what I'm signing up for. And if I decided to just quit because I got married, I wouldn't be doing my job.
Right.
It wouldn't be, I wouldn't be following my vocation.
Well, and that's not necessarily that's not anything new either. Like, nurses at the turn of the century in the 1900s, they weren't allowed to get married.
Exactly.
Because it was such an involved job that they literally were not allowed to get married.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and you see nurses now, it's a pretty standard thing for people to be nurses, and they have families and stuff. But back then, it was like, no, you either have this job or you have a family. Either one, well, you have to choose.
It's kind of how it is in this industry, and I saw a statistic, and once again, I didn't fact check this, so I take it with a grain of salt. Over 75% of marriages with a funeral personnel and someone who is not a funeral personnel end in divorce. Almost every single marriage between someone who's a funeral personnel and someone who's not does not last, and it's not because we're horrible, awful people that can't get married. It's because it's stressful and it's confidential, so you can't come home and really talk about your day.
Yeah.
And if it was hard, you have to leave it at work, and a lot of times you can't leave it at work, and you're gone all the time, and a lot of people don't like that, and that's why I say maybe I won't end up getting married, just because it takes a special person to be able to handle that type of thing.
Yeah.
And I need someone like that. I always establish that. I establish this is my job. This is my life, and it's important to me. And I hope that it's important to them too.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see what you learn next year. I'm
thrilled.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be done.
Well, and the embalming thing I think is going to be so cool.
It's going to be good for me. I'm a scientist.
Right.
I'm a scientist.
Yeah,
I'm not
literally.
really a people person all the time. So the science portion is what I'm excited about.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on.
Yeah.
This has been so cool. And maybe after you're done with school, you can come on and share what you learned again.
I know I'm not really qualified to be on this podcast. I'm not a mom, but for the record, all of the moms that I've met are just wonderful, and I want every mom who listens to this to know that you are a superhero. You're not doing anything wrong with your parenting. You're raising tiny humans, and that's incredible. That's so cool. So I hope that I didn't freak you out too much, and I hope you're able to sleep at night. And I'm
as much as the tiny humans allow us to sleep.
Yeah, they probably won't let you sleep, but maybe look a little more fondly at them tonight. Maybe take in that moment a little bit more tonight and know that you're raising some tiny humans, and you never know how much time you have, so give them cuddles, give them kisses, and spend some time with them. Yeah,
definitely. Well, thank you so much. And, I just wanted to let everybody know, I have decided for the jingle at the beginning of this, because I'm doing a jingle.
Fancy.
Yeah. Jessica Flynn won the jingle contest.
Oh,
so,
yay.
Yeah, so that should be coming out pretty soon, probably in the next few weeks. I'm just going to try to do some little finagling with that. So, Jessica, text me, lady. And then also, if you're watching on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe and comment what you thought of this. And then comment also maybe what you would like to see from other people in a different career path. I mean, ultimately I'm focusing on moms, but I think it's really cool to hear careers. I mean, this is so cool to just know what's out there. So yeah, definitely please comment what you would like to see more of. And then also, if you're listening on Spotify, please make sure to follow this page too. So, okay. All right. Well, thank you for listening. Have a good day, guys. Oh, there it is. Trying to stop this. Okay. Have a good day, you guys. God bless.